Hey Bat fans, Luke here, back with another video, and today we're going to take a look at the most recent Batman animated movie, that was Batman Gotham by Gaslight. And this was a film that I think served more of a movie that was inspired by the original source material, rather than being one that served as an adaptation for the source material. And the source material obviously being the very short story, Elseworld story, Gotham by Gaslight, written by Brian Augustine and illustrated by Michael Magnola. And I did a actual review of the book Gotham by Gaslight. I'll try to link it below. And it's a good movie. I'm sorry, good story that I kind of talked about. In addition to, if you look in the description, if you're not too familiar with pretty much the theme of the story, that being the incorporation of Jack the Ripper, I put a link in that Gotham by Gaslight book review in it, which kind of served as a quick overview if you're not too familiar with what happened. And to be honest, when I heard this movie was being released, I thought in a way that they were really going to kind of do an approach where they would really not necessarily kind of do the Killing Joke approach, if you kind of excuse the back row portion of the Killing Joke. I thought the movie was really almost, page by page, word for word, an adaptation of the source material. I thought originally that Gotham by Gaslight was going to follow, that kind of model. And I will say that definitely is not the case in this movie. And overall, I thought it was an enjoyable movie. Not without some of its flaws. It did have, and it kind of, if you're really looking at a critical eye, it will jump out at you. But I do think, if you watch it, you'll find some enjoyment of it. Mainly if you kind of look at it through the lens, like I said before in the intro, that this is more of an inspiration from the source material rather than an adaptation. Because to be honest, any of the page by page, word by word similarities you'll find between this animated movie and the book is minimal at best. I really did not see too much of a direct correlation between the two, other than the theme being Batman and his case trying to track down Jack the Ripper. And that's almost, I would almost say, the only similarities, other than obviously to the environment and the time period, Victorian era time period, that you will see much of the similarities between the animated movie and the book. And I think that's almost kind of a good thing. In that way, it does give the movie a chance to kind of branch out a little bit and bring originality to it, rather than being just a straight up adaptation of the story. But at the same time, the story was so good, and being that it was so short, there was really some opportunities, I think, for the movie to kind of provide more depth and detail of some of the content within the book that was not there. I mean, because it's really short. I mean, again, if you haven't seen it, it could be read in like an hour, if that. That's even probably too long. It's a really short book. And I will say one of the things, I don't know if I mentioned in my review of it, it's that one thing I noticed in the book, they do kind of gloss over a lot of, specifically time. You would think the concept of time, as far as time's flow, really does go by really quick in the book. And if you watch the animated movie and the special features, I think I kind of know why. Because Mike Mignola, what he was doing at the time this book came out, right before he wrapped up his work at DC, and he was getting ready to jump ship to go over to Marvel. I think he was getting ready to do Wolverine. And he was approached by Augustine to kind of do this job, and basically he was hooked, but it was really, he didn't have a whole lot of time. So, because obviously he had to start work on Wolverine. I'm pretty sure it was Wolverine, not X-Men. I think it was just Wolverine. But after hearing that, it kind of goes a little bit more in depth of what actually happened. But now I think I kind of know why Gotham by Gaslight was so small in scope as far as time and maybe pages, whatnot. I kind of get that because he didn't have the time to really go maybe more in depth because he had to start work on his next project. So, but I thought that was a way the movie could actually, again, maybe kind of build upon the book in that it would provide us, the audience, some more of that depth that really wasn't there due to, I think, primarily now, it just came up to time constraints. But you really didn't see that in here. What I will say, what I liked about the movie a lot is that the characters within the Batman universe really get woven in really well in the movie. Poison Ivy is in the movie. Catwoman, Selena Kyle, predominantly just Selena Kyle, is in the movie. We have Tim, Jason, and Dick are in the movie, in a way. Alfred's in the movie. We have Harvey Dent, Gordon, Barbara Gordon. I'm thinking it's more Barbara Gordon, his wife, obviously. And you watch a movie like, yeah, it's his wife. Who else? Leslie Tompkins plays a really big part in this movie. There's some people mentioned in it as well. Bullock, he's in there. Hugo Strange. So you really do, and they're really not as far as their characters like you see. Harvey Dent is not like Two-Face. He's really just Harvey Dent. Tim, Jason, and Dick are younger kids in the neighborhood, so they're not really what we know of them. And you kind of get the drift. It's personalities in that Victoria time period who just happen to have the names of the members of the Batman lore kind of thrown in there, and they're weaved in really well. There was a couple times, there was one scene where we had in between, I think Jim Gordon was asleep, he was having a nightmare, and Barbara was stabbed. And I thought for sure this was kind of goes back to, even though in No Man's Land she wasn't stabbed, she was shot. But I thought for sure the Joker was going to get woven in here. And I'm glad that he kind of wasn't, and that it was done tastefully. And I don't know if the Joker or Jake Napier or whoever, if you're kind of weave that kind of person into this story, if it really might not have been done as tastefully. But so I'm kind of glad you kind of didn't get that. Again, all these personalities are woven in really well within the story, and you kind of got all the ninks and nods to all these characters as you're watching it. And for the most part, you kind of see how they acted with the characters in the movie. We're kind of staying true to what we saw in different Bat stories over time. One thing I will say as far as the movie that might, I'm not going to say distract, or maybe kind of might rub the people the wrong way, is the twist on who is Jack the Ripper. I will tell you, as you're watching the movie initially, you're going to think for sure that, yeah, that's who Jack the Ripper is. But there is a huge twist at the end, which I didn't see coming. And that kind of goes into some of the bad in the movie. First off, I will say, we'll just talk about the one that's the most obvious to me. And not that I find that the person who was Jack the Ripper as being bad in itself, I wouldn't have a problem with. But what I have a problem was the reveal that it was really no development behind it. It was just literally off actor, oh, he's Jack the Ripper, and you kind of go back and you watch the film. I might have to watch it again, but I will say, at face value, there was no connection between who Jack the Ripper was throughout the rest of the story. If it was minimally done at best, and it didn't come off, it was a big surprise, oh yeah, I can't believe I didn't see it coming. It was it was kind of like it happened. It was like, really? Okay. And if you kind of look at the end, the way he's talking about, cleansing Gotham, you can kind of see it, but it just, I will say that one thing really did kind of stand out. It's like, oh, really? And, well, how did that development happen? I just didn't see it. Especially in the house of this individual, there was some acid on the ground. I also thought there was going to be a thing with Harvey Dent become a Two-Face. And, okay, I don't want to go any further because that kind of spoils some things. But I will say it didn't go that angle. But I will say again, you're watching the first part of the movie, you're going to think for sure just the way that person's acting, all the signs point to that person. And I thought when I was watching, I was like, okay, if this is who this is I seen this coming from about 15 minutes into the movie. And I will say, it wasn't, but again, just a direct correlation between who it was and how that path led to that person. There really was no path. It was just like, huh, okay. What else? I forget the term. And shame on me for not Googling or looking up in a dictionary, which everyone's quick to Google things these days. Like the good old days, just look up a dictionary. There's a word where it correlates to, there's things that pop up in a picture or story or whatever that doesn't correlate to the time period it's actually in. Case in point, if you're watching, I don't know, let's say Gettysburg, and you see a scene where an Abrams tank comes, rolling down Little Round Top or something. You'd be like, the time period doesn't match because Abrams tanks weren't there during that point of the Civil War or any part of the Civil War, really. I forget that word. But there's certain instances of that within this movie. And they didn't really say exactly the time period, and I forget my history when actually Jack the Ripper, the actual year that came out, or not the year it came out, but the time frame around the period of Jack the Ripper. But there's certain scenes in this movie where it's just like, okay, that wasn't around during that time period. A grappling gun used by Batman, not necessarily around during that time period. Electricity was pretty much in its infancy stages at this time. I don't think you're having trapdoors and whatnot occurring during that time period. Okay, a steam engine motorcycle. I don't think so. But so some of those things just kind of stood out, and maybe that's a harsh criticism behind it, but it just, once it's like you're looking at it, it's like, really, it just, whatever. Another one, I think probably the last one I will mention, the bad, because I do want to mention some good. Selena Kyle in here does a massive turn toward her feelings toward Batman in this movie. And it is really abrupt. There's no kind of like easing your foot into the water for how she goes from like being a very staunch, not necessarily anti-Batman, but definitely doesn't have good feelings for Batman, even as Batman like saves her life. But then it's just an automatic 180 in this movie, and I don't want to go too far into when that turn happens. And for me, I just thought it was kind of abrupt and really wasn't well developed in my opinion. That also, one more thing, it's just, again, I think it was just a missed opportunity. The movie was relatively short, and it really didn't flush out some of the details in the book. And the main reason it can't, because really it goes back to, I think this movie was more just inspired by the story, and just kind of took that environment and the overall storyline idea and kind of took that and they made a story in its own within the movie. So I think that's pretty much all the bad. The good, I think the voice acting in this was pretty well done. One more, go back to the Robins. Jason was just a punk. we'll leave it as it is. But he did have the red hair, so for all you Grant Morrison-esque fans of JT, kind of get a little Nick and Watt in there. But yeah, the good. So I think the voice acting in this movie was really good. I give it credit. We didn't have Kevin Conroy as Batman, but still, I thought the person who did it really did a good job. I thought the animation, the way it looked, was really well done and kind of stayed true to the darker color palette and kind of theme to the time period it was being used in the story. And I thought the animation, for the most part, was really crisp. You didn't get too much of the jumpy, staggery way as the story was going about. And I thought the fight between Batman and Jack the Ripper on the Zeppelin, or the air balloon, was more of a Zeppelin because obviously police were shooting at it and it was bounced right off, so we'll just assume it's a Zeppelin. I thought that part of the movie, as far as just the way the animation was running, was probably at its best. So I will give the credit in that. I thought the art and the animation were really well done. And also, I guess, for the story it was trying to tell, I thought it succeeded. Not perfect in any way, but I thought it was good in that. Again, it's kind of goes back to this thing I said a couple times already. I think this was just a good movie that was inspired by a story, which wasn't adapted, which didn't serve as an adaptation of a story, if that makes any sense at all. So, in fact, that had some originality to it, was also a good thing. And again, I was entertained. Again, some of the things that I thought were bad did kind of jump out at me, but as I'm watching it, it was good. Do I think it deserved the R rating it got? No. Absolutely not. PG-13 at best, but well, definitely not PG. But I think PG-13 was there. R-rated, I think not. I don't know why they gave it an R rating. Overall, if I had to give this movie out of 5, I'd give it... it's tough to tell. I'd almost put this between the 2.5 and the 2.75 out of 5. Good, average, but not bad, and not great as well for some other things. Maybe I kind of got a little bit of bias in the fact I really did like Gotham by Gaslight, the story, and that this was really not really in line with the story itself. Again, just using its themes and inspiration might be kind of getting my way a little bit of judgment, but that's what I urge anyone going into, if you're trying to watch this, just think of it again. It's inspired by the story and the graphic novel, and it's doing its own thing. And if you kind of do that, I think you'll enjoy it a little bit more. I do, again, even though this kind of goes without saying, do prefer, I think, the book on this one rather than the movie, but I think the movie still was not a flop. It did okay. And I definitely don't regret watching it, and I will watch it again at some point, because I thought it was good. They did mention in there, like, the documentary behind the story, the actual book, and how that was kind of made, was definitely worth it. So, in the special features, watch that. Don't really know what my initial thoughts of this. The next movie they're coming out with, the Suicide Squad 1. I don't know, especially since one of the characters looks a lot like Wolverine. You'll see it, you know what I'm talking about. So, gonna reserve judgment for that movie right now. But all in all, man, I paid, $16, $17 for the Blu-ray, DVD, and the digital. I think it's worth it. Again, definitely worth your time. So, this one, I tell you what, we'll go a 2.75 out of 5. That's the final verdict. A little bit above average. Not great, but definitely not bad. And while it's just a little bit of average, I would recommend it if you came across it. Maybe not put it at the top of your movies to watch, but definitely watch at some point, especially if you like the theme of the Gotham by Gaslight story and, Jack the Ripper. So anyway, those are my thoughts on Batman Gotham by Gaslight. Hit me up in the comments below what you thought. And until the next video, which will be a review of Detective Comics, the newest installment, which I'm still waiting for my books to get here. So as soon as it gets here, the sooner I can read it and the sooner we can talk about it. So until then, take care.